Hello and welcome to the norming video for Common Assessment 1, 3rd grade writing. I'm going to walk you through some of the ways that you can grade the constructed response, including an example you can use. So when you look at CA1, it should look something like this in the front cover. You'll have to scroll all the way to the back. You'll see that I have left a page intentionally blank for you right here. That is so you can easily tear off the constructed response and to make it easier to grade. The prompt for CA1 is a narrative prompt about a time when the scholar felt afraid or scared. There's many guiding questions for them. What happened, how did they overcome, and then just reminding them to give enough details to explain why they were afraid and how they calmed down. The pages behind the prompt are for planning. While they aren't mandatory, it is a really good idea if scholars do use the planning space. One good reason that they should be using the planning space is if they happen to not finish CA1 because it is a limited time, you could grade based off of the rough draft or planning that they do in this space to help you as you're grading. This is the space that they should be writing their final draft in. This section for CA1, it is okay if they do not get their final draft all written out here. It is okay to grade a rough draft that might be written on another page. But as we move on to CA2 and especially CA3 when they get ready for 4th grade, we want to make sure that scholars are writing in this space. I'm going to switch over now to the rubric. So when you have your test open, it's a really good idea to go ahead and get started with the 3 strands that you'll see in the rubric. When you sit down to grade your constructed response for writing, you'll want to make sure that you align it to the 3 strands that you will find in the rubric. I like to write it out as OIC. It stands for organization, ideas, and conventions. So let me change this view. So this is the 3rd grade narrative writing rubric. The way that this was created is I took the 4th grade writing star when it used to have narrative, and I adapted that writing rubric to be a little bit simplified for 3rd graders and also to give you a chance to get used to the 3 strands that are on here. So as you'll see the first column, these are your 3 focus areas. The first one is organization, which has a lot to do with how the ideas in the narrative writing piece progresses. The next one will be the ideas. Not just are they good ideas, but also is the scholar able to develop those ideas in very thorough ways. And then lastly is conventions, but I also want to point out that this also includes the use of language. So do they use conventions in a way that makes it really easy to read with really good word choice? You'll see that the lowest score that they can receive is a level 1, so they at least get 1 point for each of these strands, and then the highest number of points is 4 points for a level 4. I'm going to briefly walk you through each of these 3 strands. The first one with organization and progression, like I mentioned a moment ago, has to do with, is the story organized in a way that helps the ideas progress? So you'll see at a level 1, the organization is disjointed, maybe hard to follow. Maybe it lacks a beginning, middle, and end, or you just can't tell what the significant events are. Level 2 is where you can tell that it's definitely, they tried to organize it. There's some semblance of a beginning, middle, and end, but it's minimally developed. Or it possibly is out of order. The next one down here is that it maybe has like a weak beginning, so it doesn't start with that really strong hook that makes you want to keep reading. As we get to level 3 and 4, this is where you should see some of the progression of the ideas in the story really start taking shape. So for example, if the organization has a logical sequence of events. So for example, if they are using words like first, next, last, then. Additionally, does it engage you when you start reading, and does it move to a conclusion where you can tell that they used the prompt around a time where they were scared and they actually resolved it and told you what they had to do to calm themselves down to not be scared anymore? A level 4 is where you can creatively see how they've used transitions. So for example, they might be using, instead of a word like then, they might say a word like suddenly, and that will really show you how they're being very creative in their word choice. It also has a meaningful ending. You can actually see that they put a lot of thought into it. So one of the questions that you may be wondering is, well, what if they do have a really, really good transition, but they really don't order it in like a way that makes logical sense? So I'm in between a 3 and a 4. In that case, you always want to err on the lower end of it. So you would rate all of organization at a level 3 instead of averaging it and leveling up. This is the way that STAR will grade them in 4th grade, and it's just a good indicator that they need to reach all level of an indicator before they can actually jump to that next indicator. Development of ideas in this second strand is where you can really tell if the scholar is telling a story in their narrative writing. On the one hand, a level 1 may not even address the prompt at all. It may be a bunch of random, things that they're scared of. Kind of progressing to, okay, they're trying to tell me a story in a time where they were scared, but it's not, like the details aren't really there to where you can really tell, okay, I could definitely tell when they were scared. It does have some details and some insight, but if you get to level 4, that means the writer skillfully conveys the importance of this event. And the best way I can say that is that they wrap it up in a way where you almost have like feeling and emotion behind that event, and you can definitely tell why it was so important to the writer. The last strand is the use of language and conventions. This one is typically one of the easier ones to grade, but be cautious that we're not over analyzing whether or not a scholar can spell every word correctly. Really, it's not about do they get every single grammar, punctuation, spelling, capitalization rule correct in their writing. It really is, does it slow you down or does it confuse you? So if they generally are doing all the right things, then it's okay not to penalize them too hard on. If they are generally correct with their conventions, it would be here in this level 3 indicator that I'm highlighting right here on the screen. As you scroll down, please take note that there are additional indicators for that strand on conventions. One has to do with sentence structures, and one has to do with word choice. And this one's pretty important. As you guys probably are aware, whenever it is very difficult to read a sentence because maybe they are incomplete or they are just all run-on or fragmented sentences, it makes it really hard to read. So that would be down here in a level 1 or 2, depending on whether the sentences are just totally impossible to read or whether they are there but they're a little bit confusing. And then you'll see that the big thing between a level 3 and a level 4 is that the complexity and structure of those sentences kind of becomes more complex for a level 4. So they may be using a lot of compound sentences, they may be using sentences of varying lengths, and definitely you're not seeing any fragments or run-ons for a level 3 or 4. And then the last one has to do with their word choice. So this one has some really good words that you can use in here. So dual repetitive words. Limited word choice is a big one for a level 2. So it means that they are saying all the right things, but they really don't have the words to express, how frightening a certain experience was for them. And then the next two, one has to do with they're using a lot of concrete visual, sensory and visual details, but to really bump it up to a level 4, we want to see those vivid, very descriptive languages where you can almost imagine being at the same place as where the scholar was in their story. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys a quick example, and I'm going to use the rubric to show you how I would grade this. So this is also posted on Blackboard, so you can download it to read it. And take a moment to read over it. So when I'm reading this, what I'm thinking is, okay, sometimes I get scared. So right away I'm thinking, okay, I don't really see a really great intro or hook. I was scared on the first day of school. I was scared when I found a snake. The movies sometimes scare me. Okay, and then I see right here is when the scholar starts reading. and start saying, okay, my aunt's house, she had a dog, and then explaining why the dog was scary. So when I read over this, I'm going to go back to our rubric. I think it is organized in a way, it's not hard to follow, but if you see right here, it is definitely minimally developing the sequence of events. It doesn't lack a beginning, and it doesn't lack events, because it does talk about going to the aunt's house, and she had a new loud dog. So I think for organization and progression, I would probably give this one a level 2. Has a weak beginning, attempts a conclusion, tries to say then that was the time I was afraid. So I'd give this a level 2. And that's how I would kind of score it, either at the top or at the bottom. So the ideas in here are also like, they're there, but they're not very well developed. So I would give this one, I definitely think the central idea competes with those other ideas about being scared of movies or a snake. And there's not a lot of details. I would almost say that it lacks details. So for this one, I'm kind of in between a 1 and a 2. I think it's somewhat there, the plot is. They're trying to tell the story of when they barked. So I think I would still give this one a level 2. And then lastly, as I'm reading over use of conventions, this one is a little bit tricky because I did use Microsoft Word to type this, so all of the typos that may be there whenever a scholar is writing aren't there. But I do think that overall the grammar, punctuation, spelling, paragraphing are generally correct. It's not confusing or slowing anyone down. But then whenever I get down to the sentences, there are a couple fragment sentences, and that was a time I was afraid. They're starting a lot of sentences with the words sometimes. So I think for this one, I would probably kick it down to like a level 2. I don't think they're very unclear, but I do think it's limited. And then again, with the repetitive words, like sometimes, and it didn't really give anyone a good visual picture. And so I would give conventions also a level 2. If you have any questions or you're really struggling with a piece of writing, it would be a really great idea to partner up with somebody at your school. Share the piece of writing with them and grade it together and talk through the rubric. That's one of the things that I find the most helpful, is just getting a chance to say, what is the difference between it causing major confusion and me being a little bit confused, and just spend some time talking to somebody else. If you have even further questions, you can talk to your campus leadership team, or always feel free to email me. My name is Monica Miller, and I'd be happy to answer any questions related to grading on this rubric for your 3rd grade writing CA. Thank you.